Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. Today, I want to cover a kind of spooky story, in fact, arguably one of the spookiest in all of Old Norse or Icelandic literature. And it's one that I've never covered on this channel before, partially because I've just covered so little material from Gra Saga, the saga of Grettir the Strong. So this is the story going through the original Old Norse text of Glomur, the undead being that Grettir fights and is cursed by in that saga. No, it's never really part of my portfolio or project on this channel to criticize or just be negative about things. Gra Saga is a saga that I tend to rank lower in my list of sagas. It's pretty long. Parts of it really drag on to me. And it's not one that I ever taught in classes, so it's not one that I read, 10 times a year, so that I'm super familiar with it in the way that I am with Volsungs or Egils or Njáls. And part of the reason I didn't teach it was because the translations people usually find, either on Amazon or the 19th century one that people find online, I don't like. Probably the one by Hermann Paulsson is good, but I haven't seen it. It's a little harder to get a hold of than the one people usually get a hold of, which I don't like at all. So, there's an availability question there. But it's got this really interesting, famous story about this undead being who is often in modern discussions of the saga called a draugr. But that term draugr is not ever used in this saga. Certainly not of this being, I don't think, in the saga at all. And it's not as common in Old Norse as people sometimes think it is. Rather, this being is called an Aftergonger, an again walker, Aftergonger in modern Icelandic. So, what we have to begin with is there is a guy named Thor who wants someone to watch his sheep. And he can't find anybody to do it because there are Aftergonger. There are, again, walkings in his valley, in his area. There's, people are afraid of these undead beings who apparently are abundant here. Now, it looks like Afterganga can mean both the being itself and the fact that there's a bunch around. So that's apparently part of what it is. People are afraid of all the again walkings that are going around it. But at the advice, there's a long scene of him getting advice about this. At the advice of another guy in the area, he hires a Swede named Glomur, who nobody really likes, and who is supposed to be notably ugly. These things usually go together in the sagas. And Glomur says that he's not worried about these things that scare other people. He says, "I'm not afraid of those flickur," literally like rags. But apparently, what he's saying is that these monsters, these imaginings of other people, they're not going to scare me. So Thor hires Glomur to watch the sheep, and Glomur sets himself apart at this farm, which has recently converted to Christianity, as has most of Iceland at the time of this story, because he refuses to act as a Christian. And as Yule, either the pagan holiday and or the Christian holiday, Christmas, that's still called Yule in Scandinavia today, approaches, the inhabitants of this farm, including Thorhaller's wife, want to honor Christian observances and they want to fast, but Glomur refuses to fast. He says, "No, get me food." And after he's eaten on a day when he was supposed to be fasting, I don't know what day this is that you're supposed to fast around Christmas. I'm not that familiar with medieval Catholicism, but apparently the writer of the saga considered there to be some time around Christmas where you would fast. Glomur doesn't. He's kind of warned about this by Thorhaller's wife, and he goes out to watch the sheep, and he goes missing. Nobody ever sees him again. Now, they go out to look for him after a bad storm has passed, and they find a spot. Where is this? Because there's some interesting language around this. Yeah, so they came to... Sorry, you're getting the sort of live translation, which also means that I'm sort of live finding my way around the saga. So they came to like a trampled place way up in the valley, and it seemed to them as if there had been very strong glima here, extremely like ferocious wrestling, right? Glomar must have wrestled with someone, because the stone was much of the stone was loosened up out of the earth, and they thought they saw where Glomar lay not very far away from them. He was dead and blor sem hell, blue as hell, and as thick as a steer. And they try to drag him. They can't drag him very far. He's become very heavy, and so they leave him close to where he is. There's a long discussion about where to bury him, but they finally just sort of bury him up here. And not long after this, they begin to have problems with him. He begins to ride the church, ride the home of Thorhaller. So a lot of times an Aftergonger will come and he'll like just get on the roof and ride it, and they'll hear sounds of him, you know, like his heels hitting the roof. And I don't know why they do this, but this is actually a pretty common thing with the Aftergonger phenomenon. And he will kill one of the women who works at the farm. It's not very clear how, but there's an implication that maybe this is a pretty grim way to go. No one wants to go out at night. Lots of people move out of the area, and Thorhaller himself is left almost alone in his farmstead. Let me give you a quick word from my friends and partners at Grimfrost, and I'll come back and tell you about how Grettir meets Glomar. So in the meantime, another shepherd, a Thor Goucher, winds up working for Thorhaller for a while, and in a similar way to what Glomar said about the hauntings before him. And by the way, isn't one of the weirdest, kind of scariest parts about this, like, who wrestled with Glomar? Who turned Glomar into the zombie, the Aftergonger, right? Where is that one? It just seems like a world that's really sort of haunted extra badly by these beings, and they're sort of hiding all over the place, maybe. But Thor Goucher says, you know, I'm not afraid of these, and you know, Glomar had said the flicker, the rags. This guy says the small volver, the small ghosts, which is odd. But I guess he's saying, like, you know, those meager zombies or something like that, you know, your little zombies that you're afraid of. He's sort of making fun of other people being chilled by these beings. But he gets killed by Glomar too. Now our hero Grettir will come through and stay with Thorhaller, and Thorhaller will tell him about the trouble, and that Glomar very often rides on the roof, and that he may also break down the door and come inside. And Grettir decides that he's going to wait inside the house that Glomar has been breaking into to fight him. And for a very long time, scholars, including one of my advisors at the University of Georgia, Professor Peter Jorgensen, who's now kind of fallen off the face of the planet as far as I can tell, but he and many other scholars have observed a lot of parallels to the story of Beowulf waiting to fight Grendel in the story of Beowulf. Grendel is not explicitly said to be an undead creature, but it's not impossible that he's something kind of like what Glomar is. So Grettir decides to wait at night. He doesn't, you know, take off his clothes. He goes over by where Thorhaller sleeps, which is in a locked bed closet, right? So they sleep against the walls of the house, and high status men may have beds they can like lock from the side. They're like side locking coffins. So he goes over to sleep by there. He puts it's sort of hard to follow exactly what he's doing here, but he has a cloak that he puts over himself, and he wraps it around himself. He puts a corner of it under his feet and another one under his head, and he sees out through a little like opening that he leaves in the middle of the folds of this. So maybe out of some kind of concern that if he sees this undead being with, you know, his full eyesight, that maybe he'll be cursed or something like that. So he wants to look at him through a slit. Various cultures have notions about sort of looking at the supernatural or the evil through more restricted spaces than you would normally use. And then we get an action scene soon. Now, the action scenes in sagas are not necessarily very much like our action scenes, given that they can be sort of confusing to follow and very often involve more conversation than fighting, but there's a fair amount of fighting in this one. So Glommer makes a huge amount of noise, gets up on the roof, rides it, and that makes a bunch of noise. And then Grettir comes inside, and he has an incredibly big, thick head. I'm not sure if that's just something he had from before or if that's a zombie characteristic, but it's something that's frightening. So Glommer sees the wrapped up Grettir, and apparently thinks that maybe there's not a person in there, but just sees it as like a sack full of something, and he wonders what it is, and he picks it up, and of course Grettir's in it. And Glommer then realizes that he's there and tries to go outside with him, but Grettir is more afraid of fighting Glommer outside than inside, so he struggles against him, and they wind up fighting hard, and they wind up it does wind up that Glommer drags Grettir outside, and as the moon comes out from behind clouds, all of a sudden Grettir gets a really clear view of Glommer in the moonlight, and this terrifies him. It's kind of interesting that we have a saga hero here who is actually like admitting fear, or at least admitting through the narrator. So the narrator says, and so Grettir has said himself that is the one sight he has seen that he was affected by. So after this, he'll actually never be able to be alone again very comfortably, and he'll be afraid of the dark, and this will in fact contribute to his death later in the saga. But for now, he draws his sword and kills Glommer outside. So that's a little bit different from Beowulf, who finishes off Grendel without without a weapon. But Glommer curses him and says that Grettir, you are wonderfully strong, and you are always going to be strong, but you're never going to be stronger than you are now. And although you have other good things coming ahead of you, you are also going to be blamed for bad things in the future, and you are going to become an outlaw, and you will always see my eyes, and that will make it difficult for you. Þessi augus eu þeir jafnan fyrir sjónum sem ek ber eftir, og mun þeir erfitt þykja einum að vera, og það mun þeir til dauða draga. These eyes, may these eyes always be before your sight, which I have, and it will be difficult for you to be alone, and that will cause your death. And it's after this curse has been spoken that Grettir finally is able to draw his sword, because previously his fear of Glommer had been preventing him from doing that, and he cuts Grettir's head off. So, I find that the story of the Aftergonger in Gra Saga, a saga that I actually taught quite a bit more, is a little bit more complete and compelling as a study of what the Aftergonger is, but as an actual creepy story about an Aftergonger, and actually a lot of Aftergongers, because again, which one made Glommer? This one out of Gra Saga is hard to beat. So look for Herman Paulson's translation if you've never seen it. That's got to be better than the public domain versions or the version that people tend to find. And if you'd like to learn how to read the original, there's still, I think, 1 day left to sign up for the Beginner's Old Norse class on Zoom, now offering student, military, and first responder discounts. Just contact me through the contact form on my website about that. That starts October, 22nd, 2024. So for now, thanks to Patreon, thanks to Ko-Fi, thanks to those of you out there buying my books and taking my classes, and from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best. Hey folks, you've been asking me for a long time to do more commentary on mass media stuff, movies, video games, popular books, so I'm trying to answer more of that demand, and I have taken a bullet for you in the middle of watching all of the Thor movies. Now, it may seem silly, right? I mean, you might say, well, nobody takes that seriously as a source of Norse mythology, but because millions of people, maybe even a billion people see these movies, it actually does form a lot of people's ideas about who Thor and Loki are and that kind of thing, so it is worth looking at. So on Sunday at 10:30, I'm going to do a pay what you want, just donation-based talk on a ticketed through Eventbrite, but then it's going to be a Zoom call where I'm going to just go through these movies and talk about what I thought for an hour and a half or so, and be interested to know what your thoughts are, what you'd like to hear me talk about, what some favorite moments are that you'd like, or some observations that you have. So let us know in the comments about that, and I'll hope to see you at that Sunday. Again, it's pay, donate what you want for it. All right. Beautiful Colorado, we're wishing you all the best.